this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, how's everybody doing? Good? I'm doing good. Everything is good. Everybody's asked me, I've gotten a few emails that yes, I've kept on with my gardening. I got some planters, some raised planters, real tall raised planters, and I've got some onion, easy stuff. How's that? Onions, garlic, stuff like. But so far so good. Yeah, we're gonna see, and then I'm gonna go for some more difficult stuff as far as the melons. But then, and this is the thing, is like once you make it, like, are you gonna eat it? And we're gonna eat it. As a matter of fact, we're even considering doing that freeze dry stuff, and something like that. Or I'm even possibly going down the obviously if we make of not canning it. What was it that you put it in the mason jars and preserve it? Yeah, let's see. But they say one thing at a time. Oh, and then everybody, this is a new venture. I'm going to get into racing pigeons. Okay, a friend of a friend, and I mean, people around me have done it, and I had always looked at it and said, oh, but as you know, these are pigeons that are trained to go to a certain spot, and then when there's a race, you release all. They say if it's, let's say, a 300-mile race. Which, by the way, they've trained them for months. You go to whatever location is 300, let's say 300 miles away, if that's what the race is, and you release them. And then, of course, they have these little tags on their legs that work with, basically, at the dovecote, when you go in there, it basically times them. And some of these races, depending, they're all over the country, really all over the world. Some of them have multi-million-dollar purses. And then, of course, some depend up to the 5th place or the 10th place. So I already got my first pigeon with a big, long pedigree. I should have brought it. I didn't bring it. Okay. Did I bring it? It's back here somewhere. Oh, my Marlene. Hold on. I got to show this to you guys. Because I know everybody's been looking at me about my chicken stuff. But let me tell you, give me a second. I just unplugged myself. Here we go. Here. I need you guys to look at this. Because I know a lot of you people have been around. This is my boy. This is my boy. And this is his pedigree. Shoot. Oh boy. That's his pedigree. This is how the pigeon world is, that you buy these pigeons based on their, and most of them, the really good ones, not all of them, but most of them come from the Netherlands. All right. So this week I'm working on the female, but it's up for auction. This is like, there's people that do horse racing. I'm going to do pigeon racing. So I'll keep you guys like what happens with this, and I'm going to breed them, and then the offspring, I'm going to sell them and race them, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, like never a dull moment, that kind of deal. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is here today for a second visit. about stories of the supernatural. His name is Ron Felber. He is the author of fiction and nonfiction books, including television dramas and film documentaries. His latest book, The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler, has been called the most frightening book about demonic possession ever written. His other works include The Hunt for Khun Sa, Drug Lord of the Golden Triangle, which is in development at Beach House Pictures, a Mojave Incident, a chilling story of alien abduction, which is a 1-hour documentary SciFi Channel, Il Dottore, the double life of a Mafia Doctor, Fox primetime series produced as The Mob Doctor, and his fiction includes the Jack Madson series novels, A Man of Indeterminate Value, The Kafka Society, and Dark Angels, and others. He began his writing career as a deputy sheriff writing for True Detection magazine. He went on to pen novels for the iconic Nick Carter series, including The Blue Eyes Affair, Death Mission Havana, and Blood Ultimatum. He's a graduate of Georgetown University, currently teaching at Drew University's Casperson School of Graduate Studies. And help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Ron?
I'm doing great, Marlene. Good to see you.
Likewise. I want to see if I can get it on here. Let me ask you, do you have a link for your trailer for the new book on your website, Ron?
It's very easy. Just go to YouTube, put in Ron Felber, The Unwelcomed, and there's 2 great trailers. They're very dramatic, and I'm really pleased with them.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I can get it on here, because I really liked it. I love that trailer. Okay, here we go. All right, let me see. Wait, Marlene, hold on. Let me see, because I would really like everybody to see this, because what is it? What is that thing about a picture? All right, let's see. Okay, here we go.
You did it.
Yay.
1898. Clara Fowler arrives at the office of renowned psychotherapist Dr. Morton Prince, plagued by visions, exalted by apparitions of the Virgin Mary, cursed by a demonic presence obsessed with her demise. A city marshal pursues Clara, hell-bent on pinning the murders of her infant siblings on her father and uncovering their connection to the serial killings of Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes. What happens next is more shocking than the grizzled lawman could ever imagine. The Unwelcomed by Ron Felber. Pre-order on Amazon or where books are sold.
Wow.
Thanks for showing that. I appreciate it.
No, on the contrary. Let me tell you something. That's you said you're taking pre-orders right now, right?
Yes. Right. Just on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, you can order it online.
Okay.
And yeah. The funny thing, that's pretty spooky, right?
Yeah.
So they're doing the audio book now, and so they've got an actor, John Brewer is his name. He's been in some TV series and whatnot, and so he's doing the voices, and so he gets to the voice of the demonic entity, and I'll tell you, it sends chill down your spine. I was listening to, I said, listen to this to my wife. I said, take a listen to this. She goes, oh my God, I'm not going to sleep for 3 nights.
I bet. Yeah, the lady that did it for The Exorcist, I can't remember her name now. She was a pretty well-known actress.
Linda Blair. Linda Blair?
No,
the woman that did the voice. Yes,
the demonic voice.
Yeah, it begins with an M, but I don't remember her last.
Yes, and she was a heavy drinker and smoker, so I think that kind of helped. But besides that, she was a well-known, yeah. And it was like, man, I don't know if you dive. If that, I mean, it's great to be an actress, but I think it's really ironic because she's more well remembered for being the voice of the demon in The Exorcist than anything else.
She probably worked for 30 years in the theater, and they say, "Oh, you're the voice from The Exorcist, right?"
Yeah, right. It's like one of those things. Of all the things they're going to remember my acting career by is like when I did the voice for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, she's.
But she did a good job. It was very effective. I mean, the movie was incredibly effective. And William Friedkin directed it. William Peter Blatty, who was a good friend of mine and gave me the story for The Unwelcomed, was also just a fine dramatic writer. And Billy Friedkin got the most out of every scene. I think it really was
because this is based on a true story, right?
That's correct. Yeah,
that's the thing. And I think also originally when The Exorcist came out, I think this is what really also wigged people out the most.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That it was based on a true story. It wasn't like, wow, that's really out there, but it's all made up. No.
No, as a matter of fact, there were two stories that caught Bill Blatty's eye. One happened in 1949 when he was a student at Georgetown University. So there was a little article, I think maybe in the Washington Post or the Washington Examiner, whatever the paper was around those days. I don't know. I wasn't around, but in 1949, he cut this little article out about a boy in Maryland that had been displaying all of the symptoms of demonic possession, and the priest that had treated him, psychiatrists first, they found they couldn't do anything with it, and so they resorted to an exorcism. And he thought that was so fascinating that he kept that article in his wallet, this little article in his wallet, for years. And then in around 1970 or so, 1970 from 1949,
there you go.
He had been writing comedies like Inspector Clouseau. He invented Inspector Clouseau.
Wow, what a change.
Yeah, really, what a change. So he's doing things like Jane Mansfield, Promises, and Danny Kaye, kind of these funny goofy movies.
Yes.
And it dried up. People's sense of humor changed.
Right.
And there was no market for the kind of humor he was writing about. So he said, well, now what do I do? And he pulled this article out and said, let me try my hand at a psychological thriller or a horror story, whatever you want to call it. And that's how The Exorcist came to be.
That's incredible. Yeah, 11 years. What was it? 10 or 11 years after the article was written, right?
That's right. Yeah, 10 or 11, actually. So you're talking, yeah, exactly. More than that even. So 20,
Like and 20. What people don't realize that the real boy that it was based on, he died in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really funny because his mother and his grandmother were like very religious. I think they weren't Catholic. They were Lutheran, German Lutheran, I think they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of like, the mom brought him over there. And of course, I guess the Lutheran people said, no, this is heavy duty. Go see the Catholic priest.
You better go see the Catholics.
Oh man, hold it.
Right church, wrong pew.
Right, it's like, no, this looks really serious. Go see the priest. And that's how she ended up over there.
That's right. But actually, there was one of the doctors that gave me a nice review. A psychiatrist read the manuscript for the Unwelcomed, and gave me a nice write up for it, review. And so he told me that he had an encounter with something like that.
Really?
And he would never deal with it again. He said,
what was he, like a medical doctor or what?
He's a psychiatrist.
Oh, a psychiatrist. All right.
Yes.
Oh, yes. They do run across stuff like that, don't they?
He said literally he had a woman that was so all the classic symptoms of demonic possession. He tried to treat her, but the level of violence and malevolence and fury.
Yes.
Like he said, basically, there was a time, and this was the last time he saw her, he basically closed the door and locked himself in a room to get away from her because she was clawing at the door. He said, that's it.
Oh, man. See, I'm
never touching anything like this again.
Well, that's, from what I understand, a lot of mental health people, they start off thinking they're just treating somebody with a mental illness. And then along the way, they realize, whoa, because some of the hallmarks of let's say somebody with a mental illness versus a possession is, number one, that they know languages that they don't know.
Exactly.
So they're not supposed to know. Yep. The strength thing, but that they know intimate things about that person that there's no way they could know.
Exactly. A clairvoyance.
Right. Like the person knows absolutely there's no way this person could look it up.
Yes.
About me.
Well, actually, there was one of the episodes, let's call it, and I got this all from transcripts and psychiatric records from the Harvard Medical School Library, where this all started out in the Boston area, in Boston, and this was a woman whose face would remold. I mean, would look physically different. Wow. Voices that would be like a man's voice, this explosive, gruff voice. The rage that it would express like my doctor friend talked about, this fury at religious articles. I mean, just would go crazy with Bibles or rosary beads or anything of that nature. But then, because she was studied by, some of the foremost psychiatrists of the time, William James, Dr. Morton Prince, Dr. George Waterman, others, they really documented and studied this second personality, this demonic presence.
Okay.
It had felt no pain, had no need for food, didn't sleep, no illness, would never have illness, no fatigue, and was awake 24/7. So it knew the most intimate thoughts of the host, who was Clara.
Were they looking at it originally as a multiple personality disorder thing?
Well, you see, this was the thing, and this is, I think, what makes the book interesting beyond just a story of exorcism. Dr. Morton Prince was one of the premier psychotherapists of his time. This would have been 1898 to 1904. He taught at Harvard Medical School and also at Tufts University. And he was hell-bent on proving two things. One, that demonic possession that had been going on for thousands of years was really a disease that could be treated medically. The other was, he was competing with Sigmund Freud in Austria. Sigmund Freud believed in psychoanalysis. So basically, that childhood experiences and sexual frustrations and fantasies,
all the childhood experiences and all that stuff is
a lot. Created the adult and the illnesses. Prince was a behavioralist. He believed that if you were schizophrenic, it was because there was a chemical imbalance in your brain.
Right.
If there was a lesion. So for example, with demonic possession, maybe there was a lesion in the brain.
Which I'm sure many of the times there was that.
I'm sure that's there. But on his team, he also had Richard Hodgson, who was president of the Society for Psychical Researchers. So he was a spiritualist. And Leonora Piper, who was one of the premier clairvoyants at the time. So he put together really a team to study this woman. And chief and foremost was William James, who's really famous, the father of abnormal psychiatry.
Yes, he was one of those first ones that did.
Kind of a genius.
The scientific approach to psychic research, I guess, if you want to look at it that way.
So Prince was very, very hell-bent on proving this was dissociative ailment. Hodgson was sort of hell-bent on proving that it was demonic possession.
It's like
these guys would have classic arguments, between the two of them. But in a way, Arlene, it almost comes down to, what do you want to call it? I mean, so here are the symptoms I described. Voices, the voice change, face remolds. No need for hates, by the way, despises the host.
Right. You know what? That's one of the things I've heard from a lot of exorcists, that they said that the ones that have, that are real exorcists, that they say you don't understand when you're hated so thoroughly. That's what they describe. Not that somebody being mad at you and go, I hate you, They say
this demonic presence would actually leave letters. So when she woke up, her money would be ripped up, her clothes would be torn up. And there'd be a letter, something like this. This is a real letter.
Okay.
Hypocrite, whore, how I hate you. The pains of hell shall come down upon thee. You shall find no help, no comfort in heaven or earth from my wrath. Not till student Clara is dead and puts a bullet through her head. Devil, devil, devil. Imagine waking up to that in the morning.
What did they ever figure out why or how she became possessed? Like, what was the entry point?
Yeah, actually, I don't want to give away too much of the story.
Right. No, I understand. But it's like.
But I will. There are really 3 murders involved.
Oh,
3 murders involved.
Yes. Okay.
And one of them, it was an ex-husband of Clara Fowler's. She was married for a very short period of time when she was like 15.
Wow.
She came from an abusive household, and this particular guy really sort of saved her from her environment. Okay.
Right.
So that was sort of a marriage that lasted, I think, 6 weeks or something. Maybe a marriage.
When you said short, you really meant short. Wow.
So, and then her 2 siblings died under suspicious circumstances. Bessie and Charles, both of them only 4 days old.
Wow.
And the the original doctor who was sort of involved in all of this, said they were convulsions and congenital this or that. But in fact, the coroner said they were strangled to death.
That's pretty obvious. That's murder.
So it comes down to a detective, or a city marshal is what he was, Rufus Hilliard. They called him Rufus Basset Hilliard because, like a basset hound, he wouldn't give up.
Okay.
But he investigated the Lizzie Borden murders in Fall River, the Juan Coriaro murders in Fall River, and he was convinced that the father had murdered Clara Fowler's two siblings. And so he went to Boston and wanted her to testify against her father.
Did he ever explain why he would have spared one daughter and killed the other children, or what? He never...
Actually, he committed suicide. The
father?
Ultimately, yeah.
Ooh.
In an insane asylum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Talk about a troubled background. Yeah, she came from a troubled background.
It's more than dark. It's sort of a detective story. It's sort of a psychological thriller. And more than anything, I guess it's a horror story because it's just chilling.
Yeah. Well, and see, this is the thing. One time, I don't know if you were familiar with Dr. Richard Gallagher, that he's a psychiatrist for the Catholic Church. And he wrote a book, I want to say maybe like 2018, 2019. And one of the stories that stuck out was, he talks about, this is before he became a believer. How's that?
Yes.
And he was strictly like, all he was being hired for was, let's rule out mental illness. And he says that one time, supposedly, they're going to do an exorcism on a woman that had been into Satanism, a high priestess. She had really been deep. And he says that he had two cats, and he says two cats had always got along. And then one night they both like tearing at each other, so much so that he had to separate them and put them in separate rooms. And he's like, what is this about? Yeah. Okay, fast forward next night, knock on the door. Here's the priest with this lady, the would-be that he's supposed to determine. And she turns around and tells him, so what did you think about the cats last night? And he was like, and like, in other words, this guy was like, what? Like, there's no way this woman's going to know about the cats. Of course. Something that's never happened. Yes. And he describes how later on, he determined there was nothing really, there was no mental illness, with her. And they were working, because sometimes people don't understand that the exorcism is sometimes not the one-shot deal. Sometimes it's more.
Oh, no, it's over time. Sometimes again, this particular case was 6 years. They tried to treat her
right,
with drugs, and they tried to treat her with lifestyle changes and sedatives and things. And then finally, they resorted to an exorcism because she was dying. She was at death's door, and they said, what do we do now? And Hodgson prevailed and said, we're going to do an exorcism. That all these signs you can turn.
So all this time they have been digging in their heels and saying, no, this is medical.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Wow. But talk about clairvoyance. There's another scene that was pretty cool. So Prince was a very wealthy guy. His father was mayor of Boston prior to this story. And a Boston Brahmin, all Harvard, all the best in terms of Back Bay Boston and Beacon Hill. He lived on Beacon Street, and he had a horse called Garland, and this was his pride and joy. And every day he would ride part of his exercise regimen. He'd get up at a certain time, he'd read newspapers, he'd exercise, and at the end of the day he'd ride his horse, and Garland. And so they have a physical encounter. Clara, while she's possessed, and it takes like 3 people to restrain her. And finally, he takes ether and puts ether over her mouth and nose, and she passes out. Okay. But just before she passes out, she says, I hate you. I'm going to kill you, etc. You will lose the thing that's most important, that you love most. You will lose. The next day, his horse Garland got run over by a car and was killed.
Oh my God! Wow,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, see, that's along the cat thing with this Dr. Gallagher. That there's no way that this person could, and this foresee, that something like that's going to happen.
Or how about cause?
Yes, exactly. You know what? That reminds me. You know when the Omen came out, that all these horrible things were happening to the people in the
Yes,
Omen. You
yes,
remember you couldn't outrun it. Your head got cut off and
yeah,
stuff like that. You know that in the Exorcist, I found out later. You remember that there's at the beginning of the movie when they're Reagan, the little girl, they take her to the doctor, the
yes,
hospital, and
yes.
there's a shot where she's getting like I guess the equivalent of an MRI or a CAT scan.
Hmm.
The guy that's playing the nurse there, he turned out to be a serial killer in New
Get
York.
out of here. No, I didn't
God,
know that.
yeah.
Jeez, is that crazy or what?
Yeah, exactly. It turned out he was going around and he killed because he lived there in New York, I want to say in the Village, and
Yeah.
he was gay and he was killing all these different gay men and they were like scratching their head. They couldn't figure it out. They were
I never
finding
heard
these
that.
bodies dumped
I
in the
never heard that
river.
story. Yeah.
And they finally figured it out, but by then he wasn't working at that hospital anymore because I guess they tried to use people like that in reality, like let's use the real people, not an.
I never
In other
heard
words,
that
it wasn't
story
an
before.
actor.
That's a chiller.
Yeah, I know. It was like when I read, it, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
so a little bit of that rubbed off on you, kind of deal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting with all these, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, is the prospect of infection. And so Prince, during the course of this, starts to wonder himself because he's having problems sleeping, he's having nightmares, and he says,
Okay,
am I curing this woman of this so-called demon, or is this demon driving me crazy, possessing me now? But Aldous Huxley wrote a book. Maybe you're familiar with it, The Devils of Loudon,
yes,
and
yes,
it
this is yes. Go
about
ahead.
about the convent where there's an epidemic of demonic possession among these nuns at a convent in France. And so the bishop sends 4 priests to stem the epidemic, do exorcisms, and 1 year later they're successful. But
Okay,
within 1 year, 3 of the 4 died, and the 4th one spent the rest of his life in a lunatic asylum. All of them became possessed.
really,
Yeah, so that's a real possibility
I
that
did right. That. Well, this was converted into the Devil Made Me Do It case, the
yes.
one that originally it was a Warren case, but
Mhm.
they made into a movie, that they've tried to the originally when the little boy that was being, they were was trying to be possessed, the mom and the family went to the local parish priest
Okay.
who turned out that he wasn't an official exorcist, but he was there, but apparently at one point he had done exorcism. He had done an exorcism like 10 years before, and he was so psychologically disturbed by it that he told him, look, I can't help you. He was the one that pointed the family to get in touch with the Warrens.
I see.
Because the Warrens, they were always very close to the Catholic Church as far as
Mhm.
connections and stuff.
Yes.
But that priest had done some type of exorcism 10 years before, and he told him, I can't do that. I cannot get involved in this.
Well, like I told you, the psychiatrist who's actually turned into a friend of mine over the last couple of years,
Uh-huh.
he wanted nothing to do with it. And literally, when he talked about it, you could see, he was affected. I mean, his
But why?
voice
Because you were
changed, he was
asking him
nervous.
for like, I need help me here, like,
Yes,
give me some
yes,
insider.
yes,
And he's like,
exactly.
nah, we'll talk about everything, but this is that
We
kind
can
of,
talk about baseball. We can talk about soccer. I don't want
yeah.
to talk about demonic possession. As a matter of fact, I talked to a priest. I interviewed a priest to get some background on this sort of thing. I went to a Catholic high school, St. Benedict's Prep in Newark, New Jersey, and these were Benedictine monks. So I went
Mm-hmm.
to talk to a priest, and really he had been asked to review Hostage to the Devil.
Yes, by Malachi Martin.
Yeah,
Yes.
by Malachi
That's
Martin.
a real, that'll
Yeah.
put yeah.
So he was asked to review that. So he knew quite a bit about it. That's why they asked him to review the book. So I went to interview him. He said, I'll discuss this with you, but first we're going to pray. I won't discuss this unless
I
we
believe it.
pray first for protection. So I thought that was just,
Well,
you know,
in other words, it's like he what's the word? It's not like, hey, this person really believes in this. This is not like
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. This isn't some dilettante that says, well, maybe this and maybe that. No, this is a firm faith. Yeah.
You know what? I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Father Vincent Lampert. He's been in he's the exorcist out of Indianapolis. Indianapolis.
I think I've seen a YouTube video with him.
He's kind of like, because he's more vocal, and he's been like an exorcist for the last 15 years.
Yes.
Not too long ago, I read an article where he's talking about that. He says that about as far as the exorcism thing, like how quick they are, and really that possession is not that common. But he starts saying, he says, usually, he says, when somebody comes and says something along those lines, with it, usually it's for somebody else. Usually the person that's possessed doesn't. Yeah. He says, we pray. He says, and if we pray and things kind of calm down a little bit, then I'm thinking, okay, this might be a soul in purgatory, something. People come to him like, hey, there's something haunted going on in my house.
Yeah.
We don't have to go as, he says, but if we pray and things spike up, he goes, that's my first sign that there's a demonic presence.
Isn't it? Because of the rage and fury that we
Yes,
talked
he
about
says, if we pray and things calm down, then I'm thinking, okay, there's soul in purgatory or the ghost or whatever. He says, but if it goes the other way, he goes, that's my first sign that what's there is non-human. It's demonic, because they're enraged. Exactly what you said.
Well, at the end, if you believe in God and if you believe in angels, etc., you're talking about the spirit world ultimately.
Sure, of course.
You can call them interdimensional beings if you want, because they are interdimensional beings. That's the way you want to look at it. Or you can look at it like they're demons and angels. But one way or the other, whatever you call it, whatever you call them, they exist. And that's the point. Whether you want to look at it through this lens or that lens, be my guest. But at the end of the day, it's there.
Right. And everybody, I think how's this? I think what wigs people out is like when that story that I said about Dr. Gallagher, when they bring this lady who was into Satanism, and she apparently she was possessed and it's like, okay, I'm not surprised. She was into satanic stuff. I think what wigs people out is when you see people that have not done anything and they get, either oppressed or obsessed or ultimately possessed. Like, hey, this could happen to anybody. It's not that I've gone into, black masses.
That's right.
And now all of a sudden I've got a problem with demons.
Yes.
It's the everyday person that worries about it.
As a matter of fact, really, Clara Fowler was almost saint-like. I mean, she was a student at Radcliffe, but she wanted to be a nun. She wanted to go into a convent after she'd gone through college. And she was very religious, went to church, regularly, maybe daily.
Right. And that makes you think like, hey, what happened to the protection?
She had visitations from the Virgin Mary, visitations from Jesus Christ. So she really thought she had a calling from God.
Okay.
So it's interesting, again, that from a demonic point of view, what better prize would there be than somebody like that?
Right. But, part of it, I don't know if you remember, this is I can't remember, this was a cover of a book. This is really, really old, Ron, but I know you're going to. Do you remember there was a picture of this guy? This was around the time of the peace movement, Beatnik. Okay. And there's this real skinny guy with glasses, and he's holding a flower.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
Like hippie-ish. And then there's these bunch of angels warring with all the demons to protect him. Because he's standing there like a flower child, like, hey, peace, it's all good, that kind of deal. Yeah. So everybody always thinks that, you know what, if you're this good person, you're going to have these angels that are going to protect you and do battle for you. And I think that when that doesn't happen, that's where people think like, wait a minute, I'm a good person. Why should this happen to me? I
do think, and I believe this firmly, I believe that there are forces of good and evil. And I believe that human beings, a lot like the Greeks with the gods on Mount Olympus and whatnot.
Yes. At
the end, human beings are sort of in the middle.
Yes.
And they're drawn this way or they're drawn that way. Now, most of us, none of us are perfect. And so we yield to some temptation, whatever it might be, whatever it might be. Sure. But then there are others. On the one side, you have a Mother Teresa or somebody that really dedicates their life to a religious purpose. Or just for the good of humanity. All fine. That's one side of it. But then on the other side, there's another extreme. And that's where people commit their life to evil.
Yes.
Just like there's a Mother Teresa, there's a Jack the Ripper.
Yes.
And in my view, and I transported federal prisoners for a number of years, and so I met hitmen, people that killed 80 people, people that tortured people to death with a blowtorch. These insidious human beings. But I believe that at some point in time, we're all have to make a decision. Are we on the good side of things, or are we the bad side of things? But at the extremes, I believe that Jack the Ripper was possessed. I believe that H.H. Holmes was possessed. I don't think it's mental illness,
Oh, no. Because let me ask you, did you ever look into any of those prisoners' eyes and see something there that you're like, damn, I got to get rid of you. Where am I dropping you off quick?
I'll tell you a quick little story. So there was a guy, I wrote articles for True Detective magazine about some of the criminals I met. And there was a hitman named Jesse James Martin. Okay. So I was going to write an article, Jesse James Martin, a modern day outlaw. That was the idea, Right. But anyway, he was this hitman. So I went into the cell with him. It was just me and him. And I figured, well, I'll do an interview. We seemed to have a rapport. He seemed to like the idea of this article. And so I said, so Jesse, how much did you get paid for killing somebody? He said, first of all, I like it. So I do it, I do it because I like it. But it's not like in the movies where you get $100,000 or this or that. He said, I've killed people for $5,000. I've killed people for $500. So I said, so Jesse, you would kill me for $500? He said, I would kill you for $100.
Oh boy, it's like, I think that's my cue to leave now. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks. Like, that's all I need. I did.
I was like the doctor with the possessed woman, That's
yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm all right.
I'll see you another time.
It's getting late. I gotta go. Yeah, there's people. This is the thing, and that's what you point out, because sometimes people commit murder, revenge, hate, love.
I understand it. Yeah.
There's an emotional, like, whatever. But when you kill somebody you don't know, they have nothing to you.
Yes,
they're strangers. To go and kill them for money, or even just because, or like what serial killers do because you have a problem. I don't want to say mental, but because that's an easy out. But they enjoy it. How's that?
Yeah, no, I really believe that when you get to people like that just enjoy hurting people, enjoy killing things, I think that's demonic possession. They're not foaming at the mouth.
No,
their head isn't turning around. But at the end of the day, I believe that is demonic possession. Just like, say, in the Catholic Church, a Mother Teresa is sainted. So now she's a saint because there's a sort of a number of barriers that have to be passed.
Yeah, like, they have to, they have certain things. If you have certain miracles, it's, exactly.
So that's sainthood. Well, what's the opposite of being a saint?
There is, like,
that's being a demon.
Yeah, of course.
Devoting your life to Satan. And so to me, like I said, it's not as dramatic as maybe Clara Fowler or the boy from The Exorcist. It may not be as dramatic, but it's certainly as lethal, and it's certainly as deadly, and it's certainly as malevolent.
Well, this is the thing. Usually you see like possessions like what you're describing, as in the person basically is possessed against their will, right? Mm-hmm. They display, like what you say, their language, everything. But then there's the perfect possession, which is the person, like you said, you don't have to possess me. What do you want? You want me to what? Go and kill? Just have my back. It's what they call perfect possession. You don't have to take me over. I'll do it.
Exactly. And I think that's a surrendering, and it's a surrendering to a temptation. And, not to get too religious, but at the end, the devil in the Bible, New Testament, tempted Jesus Christ. I'll give you power. I'll give you riches. Right. Of course, he refused. But I think that's a perfect example, really, of how a demonic presence can operate.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
You start with this, and then you move to that. And it's like people that boil to death. You can be in a bathtub and the water is raised 2 degrees incrementally. And before you know it, you're in boiling water and you don't feel it because you've been
Right,
acclimated.
exactly.
I think that's the way evil operates.
Right. And basically there's no seduction. How's that?
Yes.
There's no seduction into the evil. There's just like all of a sudden, but there's people that are seduced, and then there's people that, because you hear about some of these, not all, but some of these serial killers, they start out as children.
Yes.
They do things as children, and sometimes I know they've discovered in some cases that there's family problems. There's really either it's horrific child abuse, but not all the time.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
not all the time. No,
some families get kids
I
that.
think Ted Bundy is a good example of that.
Yes.
Model citizen. By except for one thing, he's a serial killer, right?
Right, and his mom, because he was, even though his mom Kate didn't refuse to give him up for adoption, and she remarried, but from what I understand, his family life was very normal. He had other siblings from his stepdad and stuff. But they say that even afterwards, his mom was like refusing to believe that he had done that. In other words, and that he even had girlfriends where he pretended to be normal. How's that? While he was killing women.
Yeah,
that kind of deal.
That's where you start to get into something beyond just a mental condition, in my view.
Right. Yeah, they go through all the elaborate, let me appear normal, because that way it'll throw off any suspicion from, the weird guy, that's probably, no.
Yes.
This is, I'll have a girlfriend, I'll appear very put together. Plus, that also helps me to
by the way, handsome guy.
Oh, yeah,
Most
future
people
victims.
Thought he was like a law student or something,
Oh, no. There's absolutely, there's some serial killers that you look at them and you're like, obviously they go for soft targets like prostitutes or stuff like that. Yeah. Because you could tell by looking at them, it's like, I'm not going to get near you. But then you have the Bundys of the world.
Yeah,
where
like choir boys, right?
Oh, yeah, it's like, I think I want to marry him and have his child, that kind of deal. Yeah. And he was
it's really a very fascinating topic, but I think it goes beyond just even the idea of demonic possession, because at the end, and in my book, I make this point, and this is what Hodgson says to Dr. Prince. So this is the other spiritualist to Prince, who's a materialist. He says, don't you understand? We stand at the threshold of solving a great mystery. If, in fact, Clara Fowler is possessed by a demon, now we've proven that there are demons. If there are demons, there must be angels. And if there are angels, there must be a God. And if there's a God, there is transcendence into a spiritual world when we die. And
that was really the answer he wanted. Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Solving the great mystery.
Yeah, is there what are we beyond?
Is there life
once our physical body dies?
Is there a God? Is there life after death? And so the book really deals with the idea of a spiritual world and these sort of debates that go on between the members of this team, all fascinating characters, focused on this particular woman. Focused ultimately, there's a detective involved, as I mentioned, because of the murders that had happened. And so it becomes a really stew almost of just fascinating topics. But primarily, it's a study of the nature of evil and how to fend off the demon from just
without giving. I don't want you to give it away. Did the detective ever look at it as a supernatural event, or was he still just...
at the end, yeah, absolutely.
At the end, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't like...
I don't want to get into too much, but this I will tell you. And this is really, I guess what I'm most proud of with the book is that obviously this is not a light topic. It's, there's a lot of darkness involved. It's about a demonic presence. It's about science, but it's also about murder and such. And so the demon in the demonic state really talks about almost conquering the world. I'm powerful. I am hugely powerful, and makes references really to World War I. Wow. I don't want one. I want thousands. My vision is for carnage,
Yes, exactly.
And so that was the demon's sort of dream. And so the city marshal Bassett and I won't get into too much, but he has a final conversation with Prince, and he makes a decision about the case, the marshal. And Prince goes, well, why did you make that decision? And he said, I figured out how to prevent the demon from influencing the world the way he wants to. I figured out a way to fend him off with the only weapon we have. And Prince just looks at him and he goes, acts of kindness, Dr. Prince, acts of kindness.
Right. And this is the thing. If you listen to that demon is basically powerless. It needs humans to act, to do certain things. It can't just, it could, possess or will it or, whatever.
Yes.
But without a human agent,
Exactly.
it was powerless.
No, that's exactly correct. It's exactly correct. But I found that that's an actual line from the.
That's incredible because it is. That's exactly.
It's a wonderful thought, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And who knows
we
how
could,
much
we could do in this world with a few more acts of kindness, I suspect, huh?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've always, but how's that thing but at the same time, you don't know you dodged the bullet because you dodged it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
For all we know, there have been many bad things that have been avoided because, there are people that there are still a lot of kind people. I'm a pro-human person. I'm a pro-human person. So I always think that overall, most people, apart from petty stuff, nobody's perfect, but overall, most people are kind and giving and, sometimes you see it on the news in certain instances where people help a stranger or do things with no thought of recompense.
Well, I mean, if Darwin was right and everybody's existence depends on a struggle for survival and a competition for survival,
right?
In my view, without grace, without the grace of God, we'd be battling each other on the streets.
Sure.
It would be absolute carnage, but it isn't. And what you see is things that really defy Darwinian logic, where, a soldier will jump on a grenade to save 10 members of his platoon, sacrifice his life. You'll see people that devote their lives, whether religious or maybe medical or nurses or whomever it might be, or regular person, devotes their life at their own risk, at their own cost to help others. And that's really the mystery of evil is rivaled by the mystery of goodness. And so I think the Darwinian principle is not correct. I don't believe that's true.
No, it's not. I don't think so. But so I think it's one of those things that, it's repeated so often that all of a sudden it becomes fact. But then when you look at that theories, you find that there's a lot of flaws in it.
Absolutely.
Including that they've never, as far as evolution, and they've never really found the so-called missing link and things of that nature. Let me ask you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, there was a, I've sort of been reading on this topic, obviously, doing research and whatnot. And there's a book called Life. It's just called Life. And it's by Francis Crick. And Francis Crick was the co-founder of DNA.
Okay.
And he won the Nobel Prize for Science in 1958 for discovering DNA, which is like a massive breakthrough in terms of science, as I guess we all know. And he did not believe in evolution or in Darwinian evolution. He said the odds of evolution being correct, meaning the ability to form a human brain, let's say, from a microbe in a swamp over the course of 10 billion years or whatever, whatever the length of time that humans have been on Earth, would be the equivalent of a tornado going through a junkyard and leaving behind a 757 jet that takes off and flies to Europe. That's how unlikely evolution is.
Exactly.
But do you know what he said? His theory, and I think this is unique, and I buy it. His theory was that evolution had a head start. Now, whether you call it a creator, whatever you want to call it, whatever word whatever word you want to use. But he thinks that a superior intelligence or an extraterrestrial civilization that was far advanced took their DNA and through asteroids, meteorites, etc., sent it into space throughout the universe.
It's like, yeah, let's see where this goes.
And because we have a Van Allen's belt where there's radiation,
Right.
these came through, the radiation awakened the DNA or activated the DNA, and then it wound up in swamps, and then it wound up in seas, and then it wound up in areas. And so evolution had a head start. And in essence, we are the descendants of extraterrestrials.
Because they put their finger in the in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, that they, from what I understand, the so-called missing link, that they say, well, they say, up to then, you have all these, even though they're upright, they had like a prehensile toe, which is basically to climb trees.
Yes.
And then when I say modern man, I'm talking about Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. They have the foot like we do, which is for running. It's not a climbing thing. Yeah. I mean, we have in a pinch we'll climb, but the other ones, like what chimps have, that they have those feet with
yes.
They say modern man. In other words, that transition, they say that doesn't exist. That modern man has always had like a hominid. In other words, we have a flat foot for running, and as a matter of fact, that's even why we're hairless, because we're meant to. We don't run fast, but we can run. We can run long enough to catch the prey we want once they tire. They were talking about there's certain things, and I have a feeling that's where that evolution theory kind of falls apart.
Yes.
Maybe if you want to say we got tweaked, who knows?
Yeah, but I think that makes a lot of sense, particularly coming from a guy of that stature.
Yes, of course.
Of course. I mean, if I said it, people would say, "Oh, all right, good idea, I suppose." But when he says it and writes it in the book,
of course.
And by the way, he was roundly criticized. A lot
but I don't understand when Darwin came out with his theory. That all the churches, all the religious people wanted to have his head on a platter.
Yes,
because he was basically taking God out of the creation story, and it was like, oh.
But more and more physicists and scientists are coming to the conclusion that science just takes you so far.
Of course, yeah.
So I think Aristotle called it the unmoved mover. But at the end, let's say that you and I are sitting here, and there's a row of dominoes that goes 1,000 miles, and they start tumbling, and we watch 1,000 miles of dominoes tumble.
All right.
The question is, who pushed the first domino?
Oh my God! Yes.
And that's the question that scientists and physicists just say we don't know. There are a massive number of universes now. We didn't even know this 10 years ago. But now, now we're talking about millions of universes, not planets,
universes, exactly.
And it just changes everybody's perception of what reality is,
Well, this morning I heard it when it's like every time that there's other scientists, because there's always the other ones that they're saying that this thing about dark matter and black holes really doesn't exist. That there is no such thing as black holes or dark matter. Which, there was always that theory about the black holes, and that it's sucking everything in, including the light. And I'm like, now there might, there's always, and there was a very good explanation for it.
Yes.
But then, of course, the question is, was it happenstance or was it intentional? Like you said, the domino, was it somebody that pushed it, or was it just the wind blew?
Yeah.
And set it in motion?
Where did the wind come from? Where did the dominoes come from?
Well, but some things happen unintentionally, and then others, it's like,
But the other thing is too, everybody believed until I guess really maybe Einstein, and these were sort of these esoteric theories that you and I would never really know about, but it sort of drifted into the popular consciousness as quantum mechanics.
Yes.
So prior to this, Newtonian physics, that was it. This is the way the world operates. You drop an apple and it falls to the ground. There's gravity. Right. But since the understanding of quantum mechanics, none of that holds. And you can throw all that out the window. And that's just in the last, couple of decades that really people are just tossing out something people believed in for, hundreds of years. And now people basically say we know very little about what's real.
Now that we're getting into that physicist mode, that now on April the 8th with the solar eclipse, they're going to turn on that CERN collider on again.
Is that right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was like, are you kidding me?
Yes, the CERN collider. Yeah.
It's
Which,
been off
by the
since
way,
2022.
which,
And
which, by the way, I guess proved that you could probably go back in time, that you can approach the speed of light and stop time. Yeah.
let me tell you something, that's a scary thing. And I always go, sometimes I'm all for science and advancement, but some things, just because you can doesn't mean you should, as far as scientific
Yes.
achievements.
Yeah.
There's always some that, yeah, we could, but should we?
Yeah, no,
And
there were a lot of questions about the atom bomb exactly that way.
Oh, yeah,
I think guys like
course.
Enrico Fermi thought that if you split an atom, it could literally unbind the world,
Right.
Yeah.
And then hello. Well, this is the same thing, that CERN Collider's been off for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And they're gonna turn it back on. I was like, can't you guys pick another date besides
Exactly.
the day of the supposed end of the world with the solar eclipse kind of deal?
Yeah.
But you know what?
Exactly.
That I'm gonna segue out of this real quick. I'm surprised to see that they're closing down schools. They're not sending kids to school, and it's like, what? Did I miss something? Hello.
Yeah. It's crazy,
It's
huh?
just an eclipse. I mean,
Well,
there's
we'll
been other
see.
eclipses.
We hope it's just another eclipse, right?
Oh well, it's like,
We'll find out.
but this is the first time I've ever seen how can I don't want to use the word hysteria, but why not?
Yeah.
On a big, there's always the people that, for whatever reason, they're like, it's the end of the whatever. But when you see school systems and people in office making decisions, it's like, what?
Yeah.
What?
What's going on here?
What's going on? Do you guys know something we don't?
But on the other side of things, what sort of blows my mind is you get a guy like Grush talking about UFOs and talking
Yes.
about alien beings that we have in possession, and this is a very high level intelligence agent, officer.
Exactly.
And also for Felber, the Top Gun commander that was on 60 Minutes along with his co-pilot. They have videotapes of these. If you had the Pentagon and people of that stature talking like this 30 years ago,
Oh my
I
God,
think
yes.
people would have gone ape.
No,
Today,
we've
they don't
been
bat
acclimated pretty
They don't
much.
bat an eyelash. They don't.
No,
bat
they're
an
like,
eyelash.
okay. But the other side of that is, I personally think that whether you believe in it or you're like, yeah, sure. Unless they forget you don't give me any more testimony. Trot out either the alien or the spaceship.
Yes.
No more testimony. No more. I was
Yes,
taking. Nah, I think
But they do have
everybody. The only
video.
thing people believe is show me the proof.
I think so, but they do have some pretty compelling videos.
No, I know, but I think people now are so
So jaded. Huh?
that they think any video or photograph can be doctored.
Well, Yeah, I think that's true. And maybe the Pentagon, it wouldn't be the first time the government's tricked people,
Of course not. Really?
Yeah.
How could you say that, Ron?
Yeah.
The government trick us? No.
Exactly, right.
No,
Exactly.
but something like that. I think that most people, even though whether you believe in them 100% or you're like in the middle or you're like, forget it, you're crazy. I think right about now, the only way to convince the majority of people would be to actually show, like, hold on, let me introduce you to the alien guy, or we've got him in one of these pods that he's like,
that
dead,
could
but he's like,
We'll see. That could happen. One of the interesting things we're talking about ghosts and things like that, and is that Grush didn't talk about extraterrestrials. He talked about interdimensional
yes.
beings, interdimensional non-human entities, which I guess ghosts are interdimensional non-human entities, right?
You've heard of I'm sure you've heard of Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah, sure.
Well, everybody that's worked over there, even from when it was under the ownership of Bigelow,
yes,
the personnel there, even including security people that were just not really participating in experiments, they were just there when they were going home, because from what I understand, the winters are pretty bad out there. They had paranormal experiences at their houses. All right,
their
to
own
the point
houses.
that right, like in other words, everybody went home, I guess, for the winter, or there were something, and people that even security personnel had really, really in your face paranormal experiences, so much so that a couple didn't even go back.
So these are attachments, right? Isn't that what they call
Well,
it?
see, the Colm Keller, which I believe was one of the scientists there, he wrote what was it? With George Knapp, he wrote, oh my God, the one about the Skinwalker. And the other one, Skinwalker at the Pentagon. He wrote 2 books, but they call it the Hitchhiker Effect.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Where it wasn't like, as a matter of fact, it wasn't like they were seeing lights in the sky. They were having some of the paranormal experiences were pretty bad. Like creatures looking at them through the window, being poltergeist-like effects. That you're like, okay, wait a minute. I thought this was about UFOs.
Yes.
But they're having extreme paranormal events at their house.
Yes.
Not on the land.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely strange. But again, when you use the phrase interdimensional beings, angels, extraterrestrials, demons.
Right. That as all of a sudden you realize, no, these are not 2 separate things.
Yeah, I don't think they're 2 separate things. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book called Mojave Incident, which was, which maybe you recall, which dealt with alien abduction. And in the alien abduction case, and these are sort of the parallels between the Clara Fowler case, the demonic possession case, and the Hesses who had this alien abduction situation. One of the things that they both talk about was a sulfurous smell. So when the aliens trapped really in a camper, the Hesses, they talked about this tremendous phosphorus, heavy odor. When Clara Fowler talked about the demonic presence, in her dreams and in her room, she talked about it's coming with this sulfurous odor.
Get that? There's your book right there.
She talks about demons that surrounded her bed, etc., and describes them. Well, the Hesses talked about these gremlin-like creatures with red eyes that were described very similarly. Last but not least, and I think this is really strange and important, Clara Fowler talked about visitations from the Blessed Virgin, the Virgin Mary, who would say to her, "Don't worry, you're going to survive this." The Hesses, at the height of their terror, when they thought they were in hell or were going to have heart attacks and die, their chest just thumping with terror, an angelic presence comes from the sky, clearly feminine, clearly angelic, wings exactly the way you expect an angel to look. They called it their comforter, saying, "Don't worry, you will survive this. Your children will be all right. They will be unharmed. Just have faith." And so there are these parallels between demonic possession and alien abduction. And I don't know what it means. I haven't figured out what it means.
Like one, are we confusing them? Or are they there was an article written, and I can't remember the exact where. You remember the visitation at Fatima in Portugal?
Of course I do. Yeah, sure.
Where they were saying, was this really? And I know those people are going to be going, Marlene, you're saying that was the Virgin Mary. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there was an article written where they kind of said that the description, especially the initial visitation, was comparable to a sighting, like a not paranormal, but UFO kind of visitation thing. Because remember, this also, you have to think in context of when it was seen as far as what year. We now, in modern times, can describe lights in the sky or a spaceship or whatever.
Very, very, very true.
Different from 100 years ago, where people could very easily mistake it for a religious apparition.
It's the lens that you look through.
Yes.
But it's so interesting you say that. I'm going to be going to Fatima.
Really?
On the 18th of April, I'm leaving for Portugal with my wife, and certainly one of the first places but we will go to Fatima. So isn't that interesting?
Yes, that's very interesting.
But because of that,
when I read that, I had never, how can I say that? And you have to, because nowadays you also have to look at whoever writes anything is like, what's their background? Are they really just relating facts? Right. Or is there a slant to it? Is there, favoring of certain versions?
Well, 30,000 people witnessed the miracle.
Right. But they were saying that at the beginning, when the children saw the vision, that the church was like, no, they're like very hesitant.
Yes.
That in some cases later on, when they realized this is going to persist, and it's that they kind of like, nobody had access to the children, and that they basically kind of doctored a little bit what the message was from the
They were
Virgin Mary.
interrogated by the police.
Yeah, no, it's like yes,
Yeah. So
yeah,
but the comparison is a good one, because before the Virgin Mary appeared to these three girls, they described two flashes, like lightning,
okay,
two
uh-huh,
great flashes of light. Well, what does that sort of sound like? Then this translucent figure,
right,
dimensional, right? The translucent of a woman, of a beautiful woman, who
right,
talks to them telepathically. Right? It sounds to me like what the
yes,
Hess described.
yes,
Then on the 6th, so actually the police um, were at odds with the Catholic Church, and they thought the Catholic
right,
Church was too powerful or getting power,
yes,
and they didn't. The last thing they wanted was
mm-hmm,
these girls to talk about the Virgin Mary and have everybody, make the church more powerful. So they actually sequestered them one at a time, threatened them, took two of them away and told the one, we're gonna execute the other two unless you
right,
tell us
yeah,
the truth. And they wouldn't budge. But then they at the encouragement of the local priest, you've got to show us something, show people something. So they said, announce to the world, there will be a miracle. This would be the 6th time that the Virgin appeared. There will be a miracle on this day. And so 30,000 people, it was pouring rain, and 30,000 people show up for this.
wasn't this the spinning sun?
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
The sun starts dancing. They described it. The sun starts dancing in the sky. Looks like it's falling, comes down like it's falling, then reverses course and sets again. What if that, with the Hesses and even Fife Symington, the former governor of Arizona, in describing the Phoenix Lights and the craft that he saw,
right,
talks about something the size of a football field that domed. It was so big, it domed the area. Well, if that was a shining object, maybe it wasn't the sun. Maybe it was a UFO.
right, exactly,
And
exactly,
and maybe these are interdimensional beings, and maybe, religion, and again, ghosts and saints and demons, maybe we are designed by a creator in the likeness of this other world. And maybe
yeah,
in this world there are good people and bad people. There, are saints and devils and great people and not great people. Maybe in the spirit world, the interdimensional world, it's not so unlike that. I don't know.
exactly. And this is the thing: the three children, two of them died young, I believe, from tuberculosis.
Yes, that's
The
correct.
one,
Yeah.
was it Lucia, which is the
Yes,
one that
survived.
survived like into adulthood.
Yes,
Um,
into a convent.
right, into a convent. But I'm saying these part of it is, you look at this; they're all peasant children. They were, as far as them making this stuff up, I don't know. That's a tall. I don't see them making something up like that. They were
I
lying. How's that?
particularly don't see them making up when they're threatened. Their
Oh no,
siblings are threatened with execution. They take
of
them away and
course.
interview. I mean, little kids, I don't think
No,
fare
kids will
very well
believe you,
under
especially if the
interrogation.
police are the ones that are telling them this. They'll believe it. But yeah,
Yeah.
there was a very poor. What was shepherds? They were shepherds. They were
Yes,
little
that's correct.
shepherd
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
And but then again, and this is, I guess this is the part that gets to everybody. It's not whether if is it holy, was it the Virgin Mary, or was it a misunderstood visitation from ET, from an extraterrestrial. I guess the thing is that I guess there's people I wouldn't personally want to believe, hey, I'm thinking is a Virgin Mary when it's ET. If
Hmm.
it's the Virgin Mary or visitation by the mother, yeah, that's great. I have no problem with that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, see who I have behind me? But my problem is to believe that when in reality it's something else. I'd be like, wait a minute, that's not right. Hold it.
Yeah. Yeah. But
You
the
know,
things that the Virgin talked about with them were of a religious nature.
yes,
They weren't about science or technology or let me tell you about my
right.
world. So
But
I
see,
don't
this
know. I
is the
mean,
thing. They've kept a lot of those secrets of Fatima. Like, no, the church is like, we're not going to disclose what the
yes,
secrets of Fatima are. And it's like,
yes, yes.
why? I don't know why they
I
do
think
that.
there were 3 secrets, I think. And I
Yes.
think 2 were disclosed, and the third one I don't think has been disclosed. Or
No.
it was in a very small group of clergymen, probably. Yeah.
You know what? And I'm going to say it. I have deep concerns with the Vatican.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and I know that it's just not one person, despite what everybody thinks of just the Pope.
Yeah.
But it's run by a lot of different people.
Well,
you know, with their own agenda.
Wherever there's power, there's corruption.
Oh, of course.
You
Now,
know,
let me ask you something. I'm gonna go away from this real quick, and I wanted
Sure.
to ask you about this. And when I came across this, you know, I've heard of, you know, you've heard of murderabilia, where people buy all these items from that are tied to serial, you know, to murder, to some type of murder. But you know that there's a sect of stuff, because apparently all these serial killers, when they go to jail, because you know that between the time they're sentenced, if they're ever actually executed, decades go by. Well, they all become artists. And do you know there's a real big market out there for all their artwork? Even though
I
it
didn't
looks,
know that.
yes,
I didn't know that.
Yes.
What does it look like?
some of them, I swear, it would be like, was that from a kindergartner? Yeah, another one. And some of them are very prolific, by the way. Some are a little bit horrendous. Others are like John Wayne Gacy has one of him with as this clown figure. But anyway, they sell for thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And I've always wondered if any of these pieces of work have attachments to them.
Yeah, I sure wouldn't be anxious to own one.
No, and then there's people out there that this is like their thing, you know, like there's a special. As a matter of fact, there was Marlene, what was the name of this one? As a matter of fact, anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. But John Wayne Gacy, he had a bunch, because I think it was 15 years. You know, some of them actually, some of these serial killers, you know, they actually die before they're executed, or they get commuted to life. But yeah, and sometimes I look at this and I think of the same thing as like, I'd be looking at that if I wouldn't buy it to begin with, but I'd be looking at it and going, what?
But you know, Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes are both part of this of the Unwelcomed. Jack the Ripper actually wrote a letter to Bassett, to the city marshal.
Really?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it's on display at a museum in Fall River. There's a Lizzie Borden museum, and I guess it touches on Juan Corriero and the rest. But yeah, it's on display, the letter that Jack the Ripper wrote to Bassett about the murders. And basically, he says there's more than one murderer.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. It's in the book. It's in my book. The actual letter is in the book. The words, you know.
You know how they have those theories about how many serial killers are walking? Because I say, you know what, for all these serial killers or whatever you want to call them, that, you know, how about the ones that either the deathbed confessions, or they're so stupid that they talk to, you know, they're in prison and they'll talk to the cellmate, and then that person turns around, and I go, you know, there's a bunch of them that never say anything to anybody.
Oh, I'm sure.
And they die of old age. Now with DNA, maybe things have changed a little bit, because, you know, but unless they took DNA samples, some of these guys die in old age because they don't tell anybody about anything. No deathbed confession. If they've ever gone to prison, they never tell anybody about it. You know, it's not like, hey, bro, you know, when I was out there, never did nothing.
H.H. Holmes, who was America's first known serial killer, and had a murder castle in Chicago, where in his house, he had operating tables in the basement, trap doors.
That guy. And you know what? That he got that built in sections, so nobody really understood what he was doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And he used the World's Fair as a way to lure people in, because the World's Fair was in Chicago and there were a lot of visitors. But at the end, he confessed to, 20-some murders, and they tied him to even more than that. He was selling skeletons to and body parts to medical schools.
He was basically
black market.
He you know, back in those years, they had what they call the personals, like in the newspapers.
Yes.
You know, almost like the dating apps.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Back then.
Yeah.
So he would be answering or posting about women, you know, like hooking up with them, and they're like, and of course he was a handsome guy by those standards.
Yes.
And he would have these women come from across the country. I can't believe it. And then all of a sudden they disappear. It's like, really?
But again, we talked about possession, but I think there's a classic case, and this is true, that he was so evil, if you want to call it that,
Yes.
that by the time he was executed, they say his face changed, and the people that executed him didn't recognize.
Really? I never heard that.
Yeah. Also, they buried him under 10 feet of concrete, just so that his soul wouldn't escape.
See,
and nobody could dig him up or whatever. Under 10 feet of concrete.
Well, people don't realize that. I understand that, for most people, normal people, a normie, you would think, okay, who would want to do anything with a body if there's a serial killer or anything like that? And even after death, some of these people, they will attract to their grave sites very deviant people that want to be around this so-called killer or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Because
very strange.
The was it 1989? When they had that murders out in Matamoros in Mexico, that there was black magic and all that other stuff and occult, and a lot of it, the main guy, he got killed by the police with a shootout. He made that suicide by police kind of deal. No, I take that back. He had one of his own people kill him after the shootout because he knew. Well, he was Cuban American. And they did an autopsy and they flew him to Miami because his family was in Miami. And they did another autopsy and they said 16 bullet holes, whatever. Mm-hmm. They buried him in secret at Our Lady of Mercy, the only Catholic cemetery in those years in Miami, undisclosed location. And I was thinking, why? Because they didn't want people to come and not steal the body parts as followers. And it was like, what?
Like a satanic cult.
Right. He's somewhere buried in Our Lady of Mercy cemetery somewhere.
Yeah.
But nobody knows where it is because of that satanic stuff. That it's like, people find it hard to believe because most people go, what? And it's like, you'd be surprised what.
Well,
as a matter of
I'll
fact,
give away a little bit of a secret from the book. There was a satanic cult in Fall River.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not the only person that's told me that.
Well, actually, this was as I mentioned, the book takes place 1898 to 1904. So in that time frame, a little bit before that, there was a satanic cult going on. But then I think it was in the 1970s.
Yes,
they had another major exposure. I think there were a couple deaths, and they found out there was a satanic cult. Fall River has a real history.
But let me ask you: was it? I'm going to ask this because. Was it up? How did they suspect it, or was it one of the upstanding citizens? Because that's the thing. A lot of these people, they go to church on Sundays, and then go to a satanic meeting or whatever.
The city marshal's deputy found a site where they were holding black masses.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
And Clara's father was involved.
Oh my God! Yeah. No wonder this girl got possessed.
Yeah. So this is all, it's all like this.
Right when you start realizing what the background is on her.
Yeah.
It's that even despite her piety and all this, she was.
And actually, maybe her piety was a result of exposure to this satanic presence,
right.
The cult, etc. And so she went to another extreme. But I guess things like that catch up with you over time.
Well, one time, Art Bell was interviewing Malachi Father Martin. The one.
Yes.
This was when he was alive. That he did the 5 interviews with him.
Yes.
One of the times he was describing, Art Bell asked him specifically that he had spoken to somebody who had been into Satanism, and she had a daughter who the stepdad killed the child, and she tells Art Bell, "No, because I'll meet my daughter in hell." So fast forward, Art Bell asks Father Martin, can she do that? And he goes, yes, she can. In other words, the parent has the ability to earmark that child for, the devil. How's that?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if maybe this poor lady, Clara, despite her wanting to run in the other direction from what her background was, maybe her dad did do something as far as, offering her. How's that?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's all part of the book, and I don't want to give away too much, but I'll tell you what, it's a murder mystery, It's a psychological thriller and it's a horror story, all sort of wrapped in one, you know.
I want to show something real quick because I know there's people out there that are going to want to. Hold on. This is the Gacy artwork.
Oh God.
Okay, this is something to me that it's kind of creepy because you know of what he did.
I would say it's very creepy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, for those people out there, the clown phobics, there must be like, go ahead, stop, Marlene, stop. Okay, here, let me stop. But my point is, I can't imagine anybody spending $1 plus any thousands of dollars because that's what some of his paintings go for.
Yeah. I can't imagine having it in my house if somebody gave it to me. I just, I want nothing to do with it.
Finding out, like, there was this one guy in the UK, his parents pass away, and he starts going through the property, and he finds 3 pictures. I can't remember. Was it Gacy? 3 different portraits painted from 3 different serial killers. One of them was a Gacy. Mm-hmm. And he had no idea. And he says the only thing I can think of is that his parents decided to come to the United States for a few months, like a tour. Mm-hmm. It's like, while we were visiting the USA, let's buy some serial killer art. They put it away, and he put them up for, there's an auction house that will, and he got a few $1,000 for it. But he was like flabbergasted that his parents had bought those pictures.
Amazing.
And again, it's like, I'm sorry. Maybe you want to call it superstition, but it makes you wonder that there's something attached to that.
Yeah. Back to our story, there's a quote by Norman Mailer that I think captures a little bit of what we're talking about in terms of extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings and this struggle between good and evil. This is Norman Mailer, the famous Pulitzer Prize winning writer, 2 Pulitzer Prizes, a National Book Award. So one of the great writers of the 20th century. He says, the devil might be a presence from another universe. We might be fighting an implacable enemy out there, and the devil might be the agent of the implacable enemy, with God as the tired general fighting that war with his own agents of hope. That sort of ties together the whole interdimensional extraterrestrial thing with demonic action, and I think to summarize that in a couple of sentences like that really captures a lot of what we're talking about.
Well, and this is the thing, because I think mostly we've always wanted to put things totally separate, one thing from the other.
Yes.
Whether it's UFO, extraterrestrials, like that's strictly this. And I want to say that has a flavor of science to it.
Yes.
Whereas anything having to do with, that's religious, theology,
spiritual.
Yeah. And never the two shall meet. And now it's like, I think people sometimes wig out a little bit when they realize that maybe those two things are not as separate as they thought.
Well, I have a ghost story for you.
Yes, of course.
So I wrote a book called Il Dottore, The Double Life of a Mafia Doctor.
Yes.
And I got that story from Bill Bonanno, Salvatore Bill Bonanno, who was the son of Joseph Bonanno, one of the founders of the American Mafia. And Bill Bonanno ran the Bonanno crime family for some time. And so I was writing a book about the Mafia. And so I got to know him very well.
Okay.
So he very well. And he gave me that story. It was his father's doctor and Carlo Gambino's doctor and John Gotti's doctor. And so I wrote his memoirs, and it was called The Double Life of a Mafia Doctor. So during the course of that, we became friendly. And he was a writer too. He'd written a couple of books about the Mafia and his experiences, autobiographical. So he had his 50th wedding anniversary. And I saw this great painting, which I really loved. It was of the astronauts coming back from the moon in a ticker tape parade, going through the streets of New York, maybe Madison Avenue, with confetti and this wonderful, colorful painting. So I liked it so much, I would have bought it for myself. But I said, let me give it to Bill as a gift. So I had it sent there. So lo and behold, I was in business at the time, and I had to go to Europe. So while I was in Europe, he died. He passed away. And unfortunately, I couldn't go to his funeral. but I felt bad about not going to his funeral. So I went with his nephew, also a friend, to Tucson, Arizona, from New Jersey, where his widow lived. And this was about a month after he passed away. So we're talking, and in the living room, there's couches like you would expect, but then there's a separate room with memorabilia.
Okay.
And his wife says to me, the only thing in this room that doesn't have direct relationship to our family, grandfathers, nephews, brothers, etc., is your painting. As soon as she said that, the painting fell off the wall.
Oh.
But that's not, but I was so embarrassed, and she was so embarrassed, and the other guy was we ran over, oh, what happened, and we put it back up again. It doesn't cross your mind how weird that is until a little bit later, because you're stuck with the embarrassment. Oh, the painting fell down, So I get out, and I said later, I'm taking a flight back. I said, geez, that was really weird. About 2 weeks later, I'm sound asleep. And so my wife is on one side of the bed, I'm on the other side of the bed, and my daughter had a room, separate, but adjacent to our bedroom, in the house. So all of a sudden I feel the mattress sink. And, in your sleep, you say, oh, what's that? And I say, oh, it must be my daughter's. Maybe she had a bad dream or couldn't sleep, and she's coming here, and she sits down on the bed. So finally I look up, and it's Bill Bonanno.
Oh, what did you?
I was happy to see him. I wasn't scared. I was happy to see him. I said, Bill, and so we had this lengthy conversation. I could tell you what he was wearing. I could tell you everything about it. I could tell you what color his pants were, what his shirt looked like. We had this lengthy conversation about family. And finally I said, you're dead, man. He goes, yeah, I'm dead, but I'm stuck. I said, what do you mean? And this is a word I would never even think of using. I'm stuck. He goes, I said, what do you mean you're stuck? He says, well, it's not like bad, but I have to go through every single moment of my life over and over again. And I'm stuck, and that's what I have to do.
Wow.
And I said, wow, that's something. So then he started to get staticky.
Okay.
The ghost started to get staticky. And so I knew that the connection, whatever it was fading. So he said, oh, I've got to go now. And literally, I watched him walk like that, vertically. And I said, Bill, I said, you can come back anytime you want, because I missed him,
Yeah.
And he turns around, takes a few more steps. And then I thought about my daughter in the next room. And I said, this isn't exactly the nicest man in the world. He's a friend, and I like him a lot. But, I'm sure he's done his share of not so nice things.
Sure.
Then I called out again. I said, Bill, you can come back, but only if it's okay. And he looked at me, and I remember just like a scowl. He goes like that, turns around, and I never saw him again.
But let me tell you something. When you think of that, of revisiting, that is in a way, because like what you just said, if some of the things that he might have done, if you have to go and revisit, maybe from an observer point of view, the things that you did, or what they say, some cases, not only that you've witnessed it, but what happens because of your actions.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
I tried to reconnect. I tried to duplicate that night, like going to bed at a certain time. It just didn't happen.
I can imagine his wife must have been saying, that has nothing to do. My dead husband's not going to come back and haunt me. No, that just fell by itself. She must have been like, no.
I don't know what she thought, because it didn't occur to me how weird it was until after we left.
That's pretty weird.
It's pretty weird.
The timing, at least. It's like, come on.
It was unbelievable. But, I've noticed, when I was in business, I was traveling maybe 60% of the time, all over the place, to Europe. One week out of the month, I was in Europe for 18 years, so it really throws your life into a kind of tumult. You feel like you're living in an airport, and all of these coincidences happen, but you don't see it because you're so absorbed in catching a flight, buying a ticket, getting some food, whatever it might be, not to mention business issues. But now I teach, and I write, And so I have a lot more time to notice coincidences. But as it turns out, life is just chock full of
Right.
coincidences.
Only in hindsight, when you're really busy, it's only in hindsight that you,
Yes.
and if you take the time, obviously, to say, boy, that timing,
It's just strange. Yeah.
what are the odds on that?
I ask myself, what are the Las Vegas odds of this happening? And, if it gets to be
Exactly.
like 1,000,000 to 1, maybe it's more than a coincidence.
Sure. Of
Yeah.
course. No, that story about that portrait falling at that
Absolutely
moment.
true. Absolutely
See,
true.
that's like, it's like, and I guess he said, well, he didn't pick up on the portrait thing. Let me go visit him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was really strange. And like I said, I felt bad about not going. And it was so real. I mean, literally, this was, I don't know how long it lasted in real
And
time.
he died of what? Just old age, sickness?
No. Actually, he died in the nicest way you probably could. He had a woman neighbor, that was having problems with opening her garage. I guess it would get stuck or whatever.
Right.
And so he went over and tried to help her with the garage and lift it and whatnot. And he had a massive heart attack. But my point is, he did it trying to help somebody.
Right. He was being a nice neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you've got to die, that's probably a good way.
Yeah. I hate compared to lingering painful illness.
Yeah,
Of
exactly.
course. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to pick and choose, and then, I don't know, maybe he got the big surprise afterwards.
I've
It's
got
like,
another so subsequent to that,
yes.
and the same day, and this is strange, but all right, fine. So his widow goes, and we're about the same size. She goes, you have all these clothes. I'm going to be just giving them away or throwing them away. If there's anything you want, you can have it. So he had a couple books that were of interest to me, and he had a jacket, a really cool black jacket,
Right.
And so I said, yeah, let me see if that fits, and it did. And I wore it for quite some time. And then, talking of DNA and whatnot, I mean, basically you're wearing the jacket of a guy that
Yes.
was notorious, I suppose you could say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whose ghost I saw.
Yeah. I know. It's like, it makes
And
me
I
feel.
have to say, somewhere along the way, maybe the 4th or 5th time I wore it, I said, I don't think I want to wear this jacket anymore.
Yeah. When you started giving it some thought,
Yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
no.
As nice as this jacket is, I don't think I want to wear it anymore.
I remember one time I used to work with this gentleman. He was Nigerian. I can't remember how we got in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it wasn't Goodwill. He says he ended up some places. He says, I got this he says that suit must have cost a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
He says a lot of money. It was hardly used. It was like brand new. So he says he buys this nice man's suit. And he says it was sharp. And he says as soon as he started to wear the few occasions, because obviously it's not something you wear every day.
Yeah.
Strange things started happening. And he he says the third time something weird happened when he wore it, he got rid of it.
He couldn't get that suit off soon enough, right?
It was like, man, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself, is it coincidence or what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of it, I'm sure a psychiatrist or psychologist would say, well, it's in your mind and it's on your mind. And so
Sure.
that it creates these feelings. Even I mentioned to my wife, of course, what happened with this ghost of Bill Bonanno. And she said, oh, that's grieving. You're grieving. And I said, well, I don't think so, But I mean, you see, there's always the scientific or the logic
Sure.
explanation. And then there's always the life is stranger than you know explanation. And so she said, it's just so easy to say, oh, you're grieving. But to me, who experienced it, it doesn't cover the base. It doesn't nearly cover the base. Because basically we had a conversation, at least in my mind. I don't know how long it really was, in real time, but it seemed like 20 minutes or so. We talked about family. We talked about, my job. We talked about, his wife. We talked, we had a real conversation. It was very, very strange, but in another way, very gratifying,
And but it's so weird that he says that thing about I'm stuck.
No, that's what stuck in my mind, because occasionally you'll hear about these life after death stuff where people come back and all like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe a ghost is exactly that. some spirit that is stuck. They're
Right.
stuck because they can't make a passage, and they can't make a passage until maybe they make amends or a contrition or something, you know?
Or in some cases, you're going to have people that, let's say him, even though he did, they, in the back of their mind, maybe because of their upbringing, they have that fear of, I'm going to go to hell,
Yeah.
That's
true too.
Once I go through this, God, I did a really horrible, especially after you revisited all these.
Yeah.
And there's only one place I'm going to be ending up at. So I just guess I'll stay stuck here. At least I'm not,
Like I've got a funny story. So we had dinner one time. So I took my two sons to Arizona because my parents lived in Arizona at the time. So I figured, well, I'll meet Bill for a lunch and visit my parents too.
Okay.
So my kids were with me. My one son, Greg, was, I would say 7. My other son was probably 11, Chris. So we're sitting at a table at a place called Anthony's, a restaurant. And so it's Bill, me, and my 2 sons. So we're talking about actually books and films and stuff like that. And finally, my one son, who is 7, says, "Did you ever kill anybody?"
Oh my God.
So I go to my son. I said, that's really not a polite question. I was embarrassed. So Bill Banana goes, no. I want to answer it. He looks my son straight in the eye and said, "I've never killed anyone that didn't deserve it." My son looks at me and he goes, "That means he kills people."
Right, in case you didn't catch that. And you're like, children.
Please just leave it alone.
It's like, oh my God. It's like, all right, I gotta, you know what? And that was okay. We'll talk about the weather now.
Yeah, exactly. My last anecdote.
Yes,
I'm going to go to bed
wonderful.
soon, but my last anecdote. So we actually met Joseph Banana. I think I did the last interview maybe before he died. And this was one of the founders, along with Lucky Luciano, of the American Mafia. So the old man is in his 90s, maybe 95, something like that. But still very sharp, very bright guy, incredibly sharp. So at the very end, after I've done my interviews, I was going to do an article or a book with my 2 sons. And there are some other people, there are a handful. And so the old man sits in a chair, and I guess it's sort of standard procedure that people say goodbye, literally get in a little line, and they shake his hand or they hug him or they kiss him or whatever, and then they leave. So I had Gregory first, Chris, who was 7, Chris, who's 11, and then me. And so Gregory steps up, and old grizzled man is sitting in a chair, and he goes like this. So Gregory turns to me and Chris and goes, "What does he want me to do?" And Chris goes, "He wants you to kiss him, stupid." So Gregory looks at this old man, and apparently it wasn't a very desirable situation. So he turns around and he goes, "Where?"
I'm telling you, as I've been like, okay,
I'm
leaving now. I'm telling you, kids, you gotta love them. You gotta love them, you know. And you'd be like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna say? Because
hilarious.
The truth is, children
Again,
are.
It was one of those things where people didn't laugh because it was just sort of embarrassing, but it was just.
It was
really
like, but yeah, but it's like it's a child. It's like.
Yeah.
Especially
kiss him, stupid.
Well, and this is the thing, even to children, you think I'm only going to kiss somebody I know, like a family member.
I mean, this was so out of the realm of
like, why am I going to kiss a strange old man? That kind of deal.
And of course, they didn't know really who he was. I mean, they had
no
idea who he was.
Of course, even more so. They're like, yeah, why? What does he want? That's a very typical kid thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That they would say. I can imagine you must have loved traveling with your boys.
Well, yeah, actually, my one son's now, they're grown, but my one son's a photographer, and so we went actually to Argentina, and he did a book on tango dancing.
Wow!
And these wonderful pictures of the tango dancers, in the red dresses and the black black suits, and they were great. And then my other son is a video game designer in San Diego. He designed video games, and one of them, I can't remember the names. I'm not
Let
really
me
a
tell you
video game
something.
person, but you know,
My son was an intern because some of these video games, they have like a tremendous storyline. He was the writer for the storyline
yeah,
of when they was like an intern while they were preparing it, because it's just not, people don't realize there's writers and there's artists
oh
and
no,
there's
absolutely,
because it's a world. Basically, they're creating a world.
absolutely. And by the way, technologically, it's incredibly competitive because somebody
Yes,
else has
yes,
a game that's more sophisticated and
yes,
more real than the other.
yes.
You're washed out, and you might have invested millions of dollars
Oh,
in
yes.
the
And you have to
asset.
have certain characters that the players identify with, and they invest themselves in them, and that's why they don't want to like leave. And but he was the story writer for the as they wanted. But it
Yeah.
basically, it's not like, oh, like how's that, like what was like Mario Bros. When you see these
Yeah. Oh
earlier
no, no,
games,
no, no,
no,
not
nothing like
anymore.
that.
No,
This
no.
is a
Actually,
complicated.
it's a bigger business than the movie industry.
I believe
By
it.
far, it's not even close.
I
Video
believe
games are
it.
much bigger than the movie industry. So
Yes, yes. The and even well, a lot of these things, I mean, people like that, they have from what I understand, sometimes they have characters in some of these games that are years old.
yes, yeah, yeah. Well, what they do is, and I can't think of the name of the game that my son was working on. It's about soldiers. I
Uh-huh.
just can't think of the name of it. But yeah, I think it was in its third generation, and he
Yes.
was in charge of doing the second generation of the game. You know.
Yes.
So he's got a degree in uh, computer science and a degree in electrical engineering. So
So there you go. Yeah, my
yeah.
son, and this is the thing, when he was younger, because before it was the board games, it was between D&D, Dragons and Dungeons,
Mm,
whatever. Did a lot of the board games,
yes,
and he ended up, like I said, doing an intern, and then, well, he's got a master's in writing for the entertainment industry, but he got hired by a European company that had these games in the U.S. here, and he went
hmm
to a lot of these conferences. But like what you were saying, it's very competitive.
very, yeah, yeah.
What they and they even did one, the last one, that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The last one they did when they're older.
hmm
I don't know. They did another movie off of that. They
hmm
even take those movies and then they do spin-offs and make.
Yes, yeah,
There's a big industry behind that as far as entertainment and how much money people pay to just.
absolutely. I know he did very well for himself in a short period of time. You know, he
Yes,
invented
yes,
one of these
yes.
games and it did well, and he had a piece of the
There you
action.
go. There you go. There you go.
And now
No,
I borrow
my
now I
son's ended
borrow
up
now I
working
borrow
now with
money.
medical. I said, besides entertainment, what else is always going to be needed? Medical. So now he works in the medical IT field.
There you are.
There
Yeah.
you go. But anyway, before we go, if you have a chance, because we were talking about technology and
Yes.
hell and
Man, we
what,
were.
if you ever have a chance, if maybe you might have seen it, there's an old Disney film from 1970, early 80s, called The Black Hole.
I
It has
remember it. I don't think
has
I
a
saw it, but
very
I remember it.
unusual ending where a lot of people dispute as to what the ending is. If you ever have a chance,
I'll
look
take a
at
look.
it
I'll
and
see
tell me
if I
what
can
you
find it
think. Look at it. I'm sure that they have it out there. I mean, it's been out for a
somewhere.
lot
Yeah.
of times. It's as a matter of fact, when you look at it, it really doesn't look like a Disney film, even
Yeah.
though Disney
I
produced it.
remember it vaguely.
It's
Yeah.
very adult. It has a couple of little characters, but the theme is not. But at the end, there's something that makes you, about what we were talking about whether you want to call it robotics and science and
Mhm.
spirituality and evil. Something to think
I'll take
about.
a look for it.
Oh, thank you, Ron. It has been wonderful to speak to you. Are you going to
Yeah,
work on
same.
another book after this
It
one?
was great, and I actually um, this will take a minute, but I guess
Yes,
we've
go
got a
ahead.
minute. So
Yes.
this is the new book that I'm working on because I want to promote this. So the Unwelcomed is really where I'm devoting a lot of energy. However, many years ago, I lived down by the beach in New Jersey, a place called Bradley Beach. And we had a dog. My wife and I had a dog. No kids at the time, but a dog. And it was a
Okay.
Norwegian Elkhound. And I would walk it because I traveled a lot. I had to go to the airport and you have to be there early. And it was, so I had to get up very early. And so really about 4 a.m., when everything was deserted, I would walk the dog. And the ocean was this way, maybe a couple of blocks, but then a block in the other direction was this big pond. And so I had this vivid dream, and in the vivid dream, I was walking the dog in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
I stood by the pond, and in the pond, I saw this disc, this glowing disc at the bottom of the pond, which was about 30 feet deep. And in the dream, despite that, I had to think about it, despite the fact that it was cold and the water was certainly not something you'd want to jump into, I did, because I had this overwhelming urge to do it. And I did. And in the dream, I wound up in this UFO. And these alien beings took me around and escorted me, showed me maps. And it was a very pleasant experience. And then I remember my watch stopped. I looked at my watch had stopped. And I said, oh, that's okay, fine. Then I sort of awoke in the dream, and I was with my dog standing at the edge of the pond. I was surprised that my clothes were dry, and I was surprised that my watch was working again, and the time was correct. So that was a dream, and it stuck with me, very, very vivid. And I felt good. I had this great feeling for 2 weeks or so that just something really monumental had happened that was pleasant. But I didn't tell anyone because it was a dream. So then I got this story for the Mojave Incident in a very circuitous, complicated way. A friend of a friend of a friend who did this, and big coincidences. And I wound up with this story that did very well. And it was about alien abduction. And so I became interested in that topic. Lo and behold, I had a surgery on my knee. I had a motorcycle accident, and I had to have a surgery on my left knee. This would go back about 7 years.
Okay.
So I went to the doctor more recently, and but it involved my knee. And he took an X-ray. He said, "Did you know that you have a piece of metal lodged in your knee, about the size of the nail on your pinky, and it's metal?" He showed me the X-ray, and it's like silver, almost like an arrowhead, but smaller.
Right.
He had performed a surgery, just a basic meniscus surgery. He said, I tried to get it out. I fished around and tried to get it out, but I couldn't. And I just wanted you to know about it. So I said, well, is it going to get infected? And he said, well, it's been there for years, so I guess not. I just leave it alone. But I thought you should know. I said, all right. And again, I didn't think anything of it. Then I'm watching this show on alien abductions.
Oh.
And what does this guy show that says he's been abducted? But in his knee, he has a silver piece of metal, and he shows the X-ray. It looked exactly like the X-ray that I had. And I said, maybe these coincidences aren't coincidences. And maybe that dream wasn't a dream.
Exactly.
Maybe it really happened. So I had mentioned my friend who is the psychotherapist who helped me with the Unwelcomed and gave me a review and helped with the psychiatric end of it. I called him. I said, you do retrogressive hypnosis, right? He goes, oh, sure. I said, let's put a date together, get a video camera, and retrogress me to that dream. I want to tape it. I want to see what really happened that night that I had that dream, if it was a dream. And if this thing in my knee is some kind of implant, I'm going to have it taken out. And if this coincidence with the Mojave Incident and whatnot, maybe there's more to it. So in May, I'm going there, and we're going to get a video crew, and he's going to retrogress me.
Let me tell you, let me know.
Dream. And,
I did hypnotherapy. I was a hypnotherapist for many years. I would love for you to tell me what happens with that.
Yeah, no, and if it turns out there's nothing to it, but if there is something to it, I think I'll write a book, and I think it'll just be called Truth.
That is, let me tell you. Oh, isn't that interesting? After you found out that doctor said, look, there's that piece of metal in there, and any weird dreams after that?
No. As a matter of fact, it was a lot like the picture dropping at Bill Bonanno's house. It just never. And I said, all right, well, I said, well,
Okay.
what could that be? So I asked, I said, what the hell could it be? He said, well, maybe a piece of an instrument, a scalpel broke off, which seems pretty unlikely. He said, or maybe they left a clamp or something in there, or a piece of a clamp. Because I have no idea what it is, you know. But I said, all right, it's not bothering me, and apparently it doesn't bother him. But then after seeing this show and seeing this X-ray and this guy, I said, well, isn't it odd that he couldn't get it out? I mean, if it's a piece
Well,
of
that's
metal
exactly what I was thinking. What do you
floating
mean?
around in your knee, which I
That's
guess
not such
could
a large
happen.
area that you're thinking, well,
Yeah.
even though I know
couldn't-
sometimes they use the telescopic, very small.
Yeah. Yeah. So he said he tried to get it out and he was fishing around for it, but he said he didn't want to do any damage to the tissue
Sure.
and whatnot. So he just said, well, I guess I'll just leave it alone. So that's my next project.
Oh, I mean, that's great. You need
Potentially.
to let me know what the outcome is
I
of that
certainly
age
will.
regression, and if you keep going back and you go into past life.
I certainly will.
You know that happens. That as a matter of fact, a lot of past life regression experiences happen with people like either psychiatrists, psychologists, or anything that they're doing age regression, and all of a sudden the person will start talking about things that they're like, wait a minute, we went past this life.
Yes.
And you know, that's basically they weren't looking for proof of, and that's a whole different thing about whether reincarnation, because I have done past life regression a lot of times. So
Oh, really?
I'm so curious to see where this goes with you, and all of a sudden you just find out a lot more than you anticipated.
I have a feeling that there's a floodgate that's going to open, but we'll see.
Exactly.
I have no idea. But again, these coincidences, again, when you have a certain number of coincidences, you start to say,
Yes.
what are the Las Vegas odds of
Are you
this
going to Portugal before or after?
I'm going to Portugal on the 18th. I'm leaving.
Okay, so after you come back from Portugal.
Yeah, you got a deal. You got a deal.
Yes.
So maybe
Again,
I can hold up my book. May I do that?
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
Here it is.
Yes.
So the Unwelcomed. I'll try
Yes.
to make it.
I love that.
And
that
so it's
book cover is
available on
excellent.
Amazon and
And
anywhere.
you're, like you
buy
said,
it.
they're gonna have an Audible version also, right?
Yeah, pretty creepy too.
Yeah, that one we were talking about the voice. So this
Yeah.
one person, he did all the voices including the.
So far, I don't know. I'm not really that involved. He just
Yeah.
sent me something to say, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "I like it."
All right. Again, thank you so much, Ron. It has been wonderful. We got
pleasure,
to catch
Marlene.
up again because I'm going to follow up with this because I'm very curious about what happens with that regression.
You got a deal.
Take
Sounds
care.
great, and thanks so much.
Bye
All
bye.
right, take care. Have a
Bye bye. How about a coincidence? No. Let me rephrase that. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. And you know what? I've heard. Who was it? One of my guests the last time, Daryl Sims, who's known as the Alien Hunter. I think on my last interview with him, we were talking about implants. He's known because he's follows up with people that like him that have either found like weird metal, same thing with an X-ray, or that they've gone for medical treatment of something else. They're not looking for an implant, and then they find some weird whatever under the arm, and one of his theories was that we were talking about. I might put a link to that specific interview is that he says people that have gotten these implants sometimes many, many, many years ago, the implants, I guess, if you want to look at it, are outdated technologically for the extraterrestrial. So in other words, what they were implanted for originally, they're like basically duds now. They're not transmitting. I'm just using the word transmitting because that's the only thing I can think of. As far as the purpose of the implant to begin with. All right. In other words, that sometimes these implants, it's not like, oh, we're going to implant you and we're going to be monitoring you until you're pushing up daisies. No, apparently from what Daryl Sims said, there's sometimes this implant serves a purpose for X amount of time, but they just never come back and take it out. And then you have people that have gone and have gotten these little pieces of whatever from their legs. I've heard from their shoulders, from their arms. And in some cases, same thing as what he just described. They cannot think of how or an event where this this thing would have gotten in there. How's that? It's not like, oh, this person, you know, you were involved in an accident, or maybe shrapnel. I'm trying to think of something where you can say, well, maybe this is how I got this thing in there in this really weird place. And it's almost exactly like what Ron's describing, where they get, and they can never explain it, and then they get to that point, and in some cases they have had events with either ETs or sightings or something, which sends them in the direction of this is an implant versus I can't figure out why I got this little whatever there. But anyway, getting back to the conversation about his book, let me tell you, this is, if you listen to it, this, and by the way, this is the type of book that I like because it's scary, but which is like what I said, what I think wigs everybody out, like in The Exorcist, when they say it's based on a true story, or, and I know sometimes they're very, what's the word I'm using for, inspired, which is like, okay, maybe very little of it is really actually based, but this story that he's describing sounds like it is historically accurate. In other words, these people that are populating it did exist. The events did exist, you know, and again, I think that's fascinating. Also, what he's describing, because of the time period that it happened, it's true. There's usually this competition between science and religion. You know, the religious were looking at the science where you're trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, you're trying to wipe God out, you know, because of this. In other words, you're discounting spirituality, which amounts to you're basically disowning God. And the science person is saying, you know, the superstition, you know, this person is mentally ill, this person is not possessed. Which, by the way, I'm sure there was a lot of cases, especially where people really were suffering from mental illness. All right. And in some cases, even epilepsy, depending on what type it was, where they behave certain ways. But then, how can I say? There's certain, and this is the thing. That incident that the original incident where that the article is written on, that William Peter Blatty then used for his as an inspiration to write The Exorcist, that it's true. The parents, the mother and the grandmother of that original boy they weren't even Catholic. They were German Lutheran, something like that. And they were very religious. But when they went to their local Lutheran clergyman, I want to say, I don't know at what point this gentleman, whether he thought they were crazy, or I suspect that it was more along the lines of there was something that had a flavor of actually being that. He was the one that pointed them in the direction of the Catholic priests, because the family was not Catholic. Later on, they became Catholic, but they weren't Catholic. And even because eventually they took him to the Alexian, the hospital, and that's where they did a series of exorcisms, and there was more than one priest involved. But from what I understand, initially when his mom came with that boy, he was like 13 or 14 years old. They were like, they didn't right off the bat tell her, oh, he's possessed. They were looking at it as in, let's make sure that there's no medical reason for this. They didn't out the gate think it was a possession, and out possession. All right. So it's a very interesting, as far as, because obviously, like, he died in 2021, and of all things, he ended up being a scientist for NASA. Very weird, huh? I mean, in other words, there's more to it, as far as what happened to him beyond that. As a matter of fact, a gentleman wrote a book, and what's the feeling I get? And by this, I'm not saying if you're the kid had a problem relating to others. He was kind of a mean little SOB, and the guy that wrote this book went back and interviewed some of the people that he knew of the like neighborhood kids, and that he had a problem because he basically, like, one time there was this two brothers that I think they lived in the neighborhood, and one of them was more friendly with him than the other, and they said that there was this dog in the neighborhood who, I guess somebody had belonged to somebody. Everybody fed him, but the dog was kind of vicious. Like, this is the kind of dog that would run after people and biting the kids. So he says that this kid, the Exorcist kids, I'm going to call them the Exorcist kids as a reference. This is long before he was taken to his mom. Calls him over and says, "Hey, come on over," or something like that. So he says he comes to the door, and all of a sudden he hears, and for some reason, this kid takes the dog over like it's his best bud. The dog gets along great with him. The dog attacks everybody else on the block. Really vicious little dog, or big dog, medium dog. But with him, he feeds it, takes care of it. So he says he gets to the front door, and he says, all of a sudden I hear like the back door slam. He says, and I knew exactly what he did. He had lured his supposed kind of friend on the block over, lets the dog out through the back door, so it'll attack this poor kid that's at the front door. Apparently this kid already, like, when you're friends with somebody, but you're like, this is the kind of shit he would pull. When he hears, I guess, the back door slam, he says, all of a sudden I understood exactly what he was trying to do. So he calls out, sure enough, here's his dog coming around the side of the house, coming after him to bite him. And this is the kind of personality he has. And then you ask yourself, did the mother and the grandmother, whatever, was this kid really possessed, or were they seeing this aberrant or maybe weird sociopathically kind of behavior from him? And then they took him to the priest, like, okay, maybe there's something mentally ill, or personality disorder or something like that. Versus, in other words, they were trying to, instead of saying, hey, maybe I have a child that's got a behavior disorder, he doesn't have friends, and the few people that he knows, he's, for lack of a better, he was a little jerk, disagreeable little SOB, versus, the devil made him do it kind of deal. And like, where does the truth lie? I mean, that he got exorcised, absolutely, he did get exorcised, all right? Or was his behavior as a jerk, was that a product of some type of what's the word I'm looking for? Demonic or negative influence around him? If not an out-and-out possession, some type of influence. I mean, I'll put a link to the story about it, the article that I wrote on it, but it's very interesting when you read about who this kid was, because, by the way, they knocked down first they renamed the street, and then they even knocked down that house originally where he grew up at. Not, but yeah, because it just had like a bad connotation to it. So there you go. All right, guys, I hope you liked this interview. I love speaking to Ron. I am absolutely going to have to follow up with him and find out, where does this regression session end up at? Does he recover memories of, like, that was not a lucid dream, and that's how you got your implant, or beyond, to the stars and beyond kind of deal? All right, guys, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter on Substack. Also, subscribe to everything, wherever you find me, whether it's the video version or the podcast version. Subscribe so that way you get alerted to when I release a show. And again, we're already in 2006, season 16, 2024 for Stories of the Supernatural. I've got a lot of interesting guests, returning ones, new ones, you name it. And I hope we'll be around here after April the 8th, the solar eclipse, where they're turning on the CERN collider. Usually I don't pay attention to these things, but it's like, holy crap, Yeah, I hope I see you guys again. All right. Till next time, take care. You're all wonderful.